What's up? We are live on another edition of The Venture. I'm going to mess up my own name, Vocation Venture. Hey, the cool thing about this podcast is that we get to talk about whatever we want to. And it has to be something you're passionate about. It has to be something that you absolutely love, or the parts of whatever you're doing that you absolutely love. Because I want to bring that to people so they can see maybe themselves in that, see their potential, see where they're going. And today is going to be no shortage of that because every area of this gentleman's life that he touches, I think he brings passion and enthusiasm. So I'm about to bring Brian on here. But first thing you got to know about him, first and foremost, husband, father, sales executive. He runs a team of that. He has a huge podcast, which I didn't even realize until we reconnected. And we'll talk a little bit about that too, because I'm like, teach me, Yoda, teach me your ways. And also, what else? Is there anything else? Hey, if there's anything I missed, we'll have him bring it out and tell you about it. But let's jump in. Let's get it started right away. We only got an hour max. I don't even know if he'll give me an hour. He might be like, I got calls to get to. What's up, Brian?
Brother, how you doing, Randy? Good to talk to you. And I will give you an hour. I will give you 2 hours, whatever you want to take.
It's a marathon. This is a deep dive into your whole life. Let's do it.
I love it. Randy, thanks for having me on. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Dude, this is so great. So just to recap for people how we first got introduced, I saw you speaking at an event in Wisconsin, and you just big energy, big smile, big personality. And then I stayed connected with you on LinkedIn. I'm like, oh, I love the content. You know, this is the thing. This is why you post content, because people forget about you. Your best friends forget about you. Like, oh my God, you do that? Like, you post content. And I'm like, I got to reconnect, got to see what he's doing. I love what he's doing with video. It made me think of you. And then we just started talking about our shared interests. I'm like, can I have you on? Will you be on my podcast? And then I found out you're like, big time podcast sponsors, almost 1,000 under your belt, dude. That's a big accomplishment. Most people give up after like 12, and they give up after like a year. They don't stick to it for like this. So
it's true, man. Well, listen, I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but it's been a long time coming to where I am today from the podcasting standpoint. I started the show back in 2018, and I had no idea what the heck I was doing. One of my buddies, Chris Spangle, he does a lot of work here in Indianapolis with the Bob and Tom Show, and he does podcasting as a side hustle. And I started connecting with him, and he was basically like the driver of the technology behind the scenes, because I had no idea. What's an RSS feed, Randy? I don't know what that is. Stuff like that. So I start talking to Chris. We start having more and more of a conversation. I start learning more about the tech, and then fast forward to today. You mentioned it, like we're under 1,000 episodes. We're like 870 or so total. And the whole genesis for the show was just like, you look. I'm a sales guy, right? You see a problem in the world and you want to help bring a solution to the table. And the problem I saw in the world was that like everybody was talking about politics and they were hating each other. They couldn't have a coherent dialogue or just a conversation about issues that they disagreed with. So how can we talk about these issues, not just the issues themselves, but how do we solve these problems? So my show really, it turned into a political / just a solutions show. It started more in the world of politics, but quickly evolved to, I'm having entrepreneurs on my show. I'm having business leaders on my show who they saw problems in respective areas, and they said, I think I can solve that. And instead of saying, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Government official, can you come here and help us with this? They say, I think I'm going to be able to fix this myself, and we can do it, 10 times, 20 times faster, and at 1/10 the cost. Let's do this. And that was one of the best things I got to see, is that we can solve the problems that we see right now, just like we do in the world of business, Randy. Like I find myself in the contact center space, and we're helping solve, customer service, customer experience issues for companies. The same thing is true in any other area in life. As long as there is a legitimate problem that you can bring a solution to the table to solve, people are going to be listening. So thanks, man. That was kind of the little bit of a sneak peek into who I am, I guess, the peek behind the curtain, if you will.
I love it. And the thing with what your podcast is, when I look through, I'm like, look at the diversity of topics that you're on.
Yeah.
And then from hundreds of things that were in there, I had to look at the sales stuff, which you had quite a bit on. You obviously have a lot on politics, and it's 100%. Like, why aren't we able to go, you can believe something different than me, and that's okay. You're not the enemy. You're not evil. You're not a bad person because you grew up with a different experience, which shaped your values. You had different parents. That's all okay. Can we be respectful? Can we have a dialogue? You probably have a reason for believing what you believe. Tell me why you believe that. I think that's only times I ever get frustrated with people, if they get angry because they so much identify with their belief that they can't even question it or talk about it. It's like, well, what's the point? You're just dogmatic. There's no point in having a conversation unless I just want to get regurgitated on just what you believe. Let's talk back and forth. Why do you think
Yes.
that? Where did it come from? And usually I can say I've never had it so bad where I didn't learn something or could not see, okay, if I had that same thing, if that's where my parents came from, I might think the same thing. Or if I had these privileges or these shortcomings, whatever it would be, maybe that would also shape it. So can we understand that we're all humans? Most people just want to love their families. They want to work hard. They want to be successful in life, and they might see different things, and they might be 100% wrong. And that's okay. I might be wrong about things too. So like they could be wrong about it. That doesn't affect what I believe. It doesn't affect what I know to be true. Like it doesn't challenge. And I think that's something that maybe has happened too much, is like people's identity is so confused that now they start latching on to like whatever they like externally becomes them. I mean,
Ism. This is
yeah.
the danger of the isms. I will paraphrase my favorite comedy movie, Hero, and that is Ferris Bueller, where he says, isms, in my opinion, are not good. To quote John Lennon, I don't believe in Beatles. I just believe in me. He was the walrus. I could be the walrus, but it wouldn't change the fact that I would still have to bum rides off of people because I don't have a car. But going back to the isms are the issue, right? When people aren't able to, in their own world, identify who they are, what they believe, why they believe it, and how they got to those conclusions. Instead, the natural thing is to find that proverbial ism and attach yourself to that. So whether that is conservatism, liberalism, socialism, libertarianism, whatever that ism is, I see this far too often where people will now become that ism, right? It's no longer I'm John Doe who happens to believe X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
It's I'm a blank. Oh, and my name is also John Doe. The ism is not who you are. The ism is something that you happen to believe, or maybe a principle or a value you bring to the table, but that's not who you are. It's a part of who you are, but it itself is not you. It is part of what makes you you. And it's good to understand how you got to that ism versus just, the emotional connection to an ism, which is very dangerous. And we don't have to go through the historical examples to explain that. But any ism that gets people on board just by an emotion, super scary. And that's why I wanted to make my show more focused on how can we talk about the issues without the isms, right? How can we talk about the solutions without the ism attached to it? So I think that speaks to exactly what you're talking about, man. Like we got to be able to have a dialogue, avoid the very I guess ideological isms that can really peek into these conversations. And let's just talk to each other like people. And that right there, that's what's missing. Being a human being, having a legitimate conversation with somebody who maybe agrees with you, but more likely than not, they don't.
And at least not on everything. Plus, you just
they shouldn't agree with you on everything. If you do, that's a big red flag. I'm waving that from the top of the mountain then.
Get in a different room where people think differently and challenge you, because even if they just challenge what you believe, it either reinforces why you believe in it, or it makes you have to seek out and go, you know what, that is a point I've never considered. And then you can grow as a person. So yeah. And then also there's got to be like a CrossFit-ism. Like what's the CrossFit-ism? Because it's the same thing, right? Like this is the only way. Do you do this? Oh my God, you've got to do this. Everyone I know, and we've all been there. I've tried CrossFit. I get it. I kind of dig it. But it's a cult, and that can be your ideology. It can be whatever you subscribe to, and it's the only way to think or view the world. It essentially becomes a cult, and then you've got your cult leaders who you look up to, and you just regurgitate whatever they say. It's like, wait, is that a soundbite, or did you actually think that through? And so that's where it's cool what you're doing. Like,
well, Randy, really quick, I don't mean to jump in, but like this also, wow, we're really talking about some very, I guess, weighted topics today, just at the onset. So
we're going in deep. I thought this was going to be about business, about contact centers. We're going into like the psychology and fabric of society and pulling it.
Don't worry, folks. We'll get there. We'll get back to business. But like this is where, when you don't have some underlying unifying value behind the scenes that brings people together, and I mean, whether people love it or hate it, but this is the role that organized religion has played for generations, right? It was always that that underlying structure that a society was built upon, not just in terms of, the worshiping of a particular, God or religion, but also the structure that it put in place, the values that it brings to the table, the morals, the principles. And a lot of that has gone missing in contemporary society. If we look at any use of modern religion, and it's been just dropping dramatically over the past 50 years. And you're seeing that especially here in America, where you lose that unifying religion or something therein, and instead, back to what we were just talking about, being replaced with those isms, right? So instead of somebody having a community and having a network of folks within a religious institution that they could build that relationship with, now they're going on to the interwebs. They're finding a collective group on social media like Facebook, and they're going into that group of other folks who believe the ism. And this is where we get really scary, dangerous territory, Randy, right? Is where you start to avoid the tough conversations. Right now, what you're doing is you're finding yourself in a bubble of people, that's right, who think and act and speak like you do, which then creates the perception that, oh, well, this is my tribe. This is now the C word, the cult, right? This is the group of people, the one of us, one of us. Same mentality, right? Yeah, exactly. Just like in Wolf of Wall Street. But like, if you are so intoxicated by the I'm with a group of people who look and speak and think like me, that really puts you in a dangerous spot, because now you're not subjecting yourself to people who don't think and speak and act like you. And that right there is what makes society, by and large, great, is that you have to be able to interact with people who don't think like you, who don't speak like you, who don't act like you, and to be able to not just say, oh, well, your belief is wrong, right? But like, bring value to the table. It's just, don't say you're wrong. Say, I think my idea actually can help solve this problem better, and here's why. Have that intelligent dialogue versus, and again, I hate going back to this point, but the isms. If you are so rooted in ism, and you say, well, this would work if everybody else did what they're supposed to do, that's not a solution. Then that's again back to the isms. That's an ism. That's not something that's actionable. So if your idea can only live in a utopia where everybody looks and thinks and sounds just like you, right? Exactly. Like, what are you doing? That is not a real tangible thing. So that is exactly why I think these conversations are so important. Why I actually love podcasts versus your traditional news, your news channels, because news channels, Randy Wolowski here on CBS Evening News. I have Brian Nichols on for 3 minutes to talk about a very important topic in only 3 minutes, though. Versus podcasts, we can have a long form conversation about anything in hyper specific detail, and we can go any route you want to go, focus on any rabbit hole you want to go down, and we can have more context brought to the table, which isn't just more of a service to us having the conversation, but it's also a service to the folks listening to the conversation, because that context that's normally missing from your traditional corporate media news, that's where you get that value in the podcast. Yeah. So that's why I love podcasting. That's why I think that the podcast medium is so great. And Randy, that's why I'm so glad to be on here today. So thanks for that, man.
We'll put a pin in this, because I think this is such a good topic, but I want to make sure we get to
for sure
anyone who
business. I know.
No, not just business, but your podcast. I would love to hear kind of the, we'll get, all right, let me put the pin. I said there's going to be a pin, then I went on a big statement. All right, let's get back to it. What you're saying is 100% true. And a lot of people will go, hey, you know what? Go watch Fox News and watch MSNBC and then figure out the middle area. And you could do that, but I feel like they're both they only want to tell you it from one angle. And that might give you a more rounded, that's going to be pretty painful. Most people don't want to sit there and just totally disagree with something the whole time. What I think is more palatable, and you touched on it with podcasts, have a conversation with an actual person that disagrees, and just be open and curious. You're going to learn more about what they think and why they think it and where it comes from than by getting all these different points of view from hyper-specific people that have their own agendas. The average person might have their biases, but they probably don't have an agenda, like they've got to get it to you. And if they can ping pong back and forth with you and share an idea, and they'll listen to an idea, now that's a good person. Like I've had that where there's people around me that we always see. We might tease each other we might go, oh, look what's happening, and send a message. But there's good things in that it can go both ways. Whereas if you're only in one camp and you don't even look over the fence and go, hey, what are they doing over there and why? And what is the truth? There wouldn't be a whole group of people, gathered around an idea if there was no part of it that had any truth. It could even be 80% wrong, but there's some truth over there, or they wouldn't even be able to collectively. And what's the truth?
Randy, did you watch Ted Lasso?
Wait, that sounds familiar, but no. For some
Okay,
reason, you think of the bear, so I was thinking Ted. And I'm like, wait a minute, no, Ted Lasso. Wait, I know that name, and I can't even think of it. But no, tell me, who's Ted Lasso?
All right, so Ted Lasso, that was the Jason Sudeikis show that was on Apple TV. I think it just wrapped up its final season. Ted Lasso, Jason Sudeikis.
I Jason Sudeikis. Ted Lasso. While you're talking,
yeah. So Ted. Yeah, you do your thing. So Ted Lasso, he was an American football coach. He gets signed to be a United Kingdom soccer coach, different football. But the guy was brought in to be the coach. The owner of the team was like, oh, he's going to do terrible, and I'm going to be able to have this be a big FU to my ex-husband who used to own the team because he loves the team. Turns into this whole thing. Ted Lasso becomes a good coach for the football team, soccer team. But there's one scene. I think it's in the final season or second to last season, and Ted is he's in the bar, and the ex-wife's the owner of the team's ex-husband comes into the bar, and he starts being cocky and arrogant, and he starts challenging Ted some, and Ted says, "Oh, you want to play some darts?" And he starts telling a story about when he would go to play darts when he was a kid, and he just starts pegging bullseyes. And the moral of the story is to be curious and not judgmental. And that's how in the story Ted articulates that you could have learned that I played darts by asking me some questions like, hey, what did you do when you were growing up, when you were hanging out with your dad, when you would go to the bar? And, oh, when you would play darts, how did you do? And, oh, you were knocking away bullseyes every single night. Curious, not judgmental. If you go in with preconceived notions, or you go in, as you mentioned, Randy, with an agenda, then you already have a laser focus of your end destination in mind. But if you're genuinely trying to understand and you're genuinely trying to satisfy this curiosity you have to go in without expectations, without the understanding that you might end up at your end destination, or hey, maybe you're going to end up somewhere else, and that's okay. Because as you said, everybody kind of ends at some end position based on some kernel of truth. Now, it might not be necessarily the full truth. It might be a piece of the truth, but they got to some endpoint based on something. So we have to find out what that something is. I always talk about on my show, and part of my sales training when I teach SDRs and BDRs, is to meet people where they're at on the issues they care about, not what you care about or what you think they should care about. And that starts with understanding who you're talking to. What do they care about? What are their main drivers? What are their main fears? And if you don't know, ask them. Ask the question, because at the end of the day, you're talking to a person. And Randy, I don't know if you've experienced this as you've been, going through and having conversations over the past 5 years, especially in a post-COVID world, but it feels more and more that these conversations that people have, they've really become surface level. They don't really want to dig into the weeds. And I think part of that is because, number one, we're not in an environment where we're all together like we were even back to 2019 and before. It was just a different environment. But even to where we are right now, add that difference plus the political and the climate that we find ourselves in right now as a country, as a planet. It's not the best. So I think we're also all walking on eggshells, afraid of these dialogues, afraid of these deep dive conversations, when in reality and in all actuality, it is those exact deep dive conversations, those exact deep dive dialogues that are going to be the very thing that saves us, not just as individuals, but also as that collective society, because a society that can't work together or talk together is a society that's doomed for collapse. So yeah, I hope that brings some context.
Oh my goodness. No, that's the word that jumped out at me when you're talking is people's egos. Get your ego out of the way. You can't be
check it at the door. Yes.
You can't be interested or curious as to what a prospect wants and actually they need if it's all about you and what your agenda is. You can't be curious as to what your fellow man or woman is interested in as far as their politics and whatnot, if it's all about, no, I have to convert you. I have to change you to my way of thinking because my way is the only way of thinking and your way is wrong. So let me just beat you over the head with stuff until you decide. And that happens again. To say it's a human thing, right? That's a human nature thing. I think the other reason things are surface level is a little bit of the climate that has been created by a lot of social media and by the media in general, where people are afraid to speak their mind. It's a weird world that we're in, but we have to navigate that. And there has to be some people that are brave enough just to be authentic and say what they have to say.
Hey, Randy, I mean, really quick, like, let's get real for a second, right?
Yes.
Back in 2020, now for folks in the audience, this might make you a little upset, and that's okay. That's why we're having these dialogues. Right.
Trigger for all you. Oh,
get your warning, folks! Warning! I'm flashing it on the screen right now. But back in 2020, I was one of those guys who was saying, I don't know if we should be just arbitrarily locking down society and determining half the group of people are considered essential and the other half are non-essential. Take that a step further. I don't think that we should be arbitrarily forcing every single person in society to get an experimental vaccine despite any pre-existing health factors or situations or any, like, no context.
Just painted like everyone has to do whatever we want.
One size fits all, cookie cutter approach, like however you want to label it. This approach really bothered me. And I said as much back during all the insanity. And I'm just going to say right now,
been very popular at the time, huh?
I was not popular. I had a lot of very good friends look at me like I had 9 heads. But I'll tell you what, I had a CEO at my old company at Stratus IP who not only did he have my back, he was saying, Brian, speak your truth. Speak what you believe, because this is how conversations happen. I mean, I think back to, I had this conversation with my old CEO, and when all the insanity was happening at the time, and he had gone to some meeting, and they were talking about how to bring diversity, equity, and inclusion into the workplace. And it was talking about different hiring practices and stuff. And he and I are just shooting the crap one day after work.
Yeah.
And he goes, you know what, Brian? I've enacted 0 of these policies, and yet I can walk out of my office right now and look into this building. I have a predominantly 50-50 split between men and women. I have literally a cornucopia of different folks from all different backgrounds, ethnicities, religions who are working here. I mean, we had this build itself by accident. It wasn't intentional. And to have that conversation, it was so refreshing, because those conversations traditionally aren't comfortable, or frankly, conversations that you don't want to have in general with anybody, because you're like, am I going to say the wrong thing? Am I going to get in trouble? And back to COVID, that was very much how I saw a lot of my peers, not at my old company, but just in the world. They were afraid to speak their mind. They were afraid to say, maybe this isn't the best approach. And listen, I know a lot of folks are still saying, hey, we should have done this. Hey, we should have done that. Hey, that science is still out. That's okay. But we need to be able to have a conversation, right? If we can't even ask questions, it's not a conversation. It's a dictate. And if it's a dictate, then just say as much. Say, hey, listen, we're going to forcefully make everybody do this. But be honest, be transparent. Don't say, hey, we're going to roll out this thing. Some people should take it, or we're going to mandate your employer. I don't know. We're going to talk about it. It creates anxiety. It creates uncertainty. And then, oh, by the way, you can't talk about this. You can't bring different perspectives to the table, because we might ban you. We might censor you. You might get fired, right? Like that is where the frustration, and I think to where we are today, now it's almost on the opposite side. So many people have gone through 4 or 5 years of insanity that now they're like, I'm just going to find the people that think like I do, because F this. I don't want to deal with all this craziness again. I'm going to be with my tribe. And that's where things get scary. So I'm trying, and I think that's what we're doing today. How do we bring back conversation, bring back, even then when you disagree, how can you have an intelligent, thoughtful dialogue and not lead the conversation as enemies, but at least understanding at least where the other person is coming from, how they got to where they are, walk in their shoes, if you will, have some empathy, stuff like that.
Yes. I've worked with a lot of people that are in the DEI space, and some wonderful people, which what you're talking
Absolutely.
about. What's funny is that sometimes they'll get corrected by people that they're not speaking the right way, or they're not saying that, or they don't have the right priorities. And it's like, you guys are infighting when the goal for all of us should be, hey, we just want an even playing field. We want everybody to be able to participate. We don't want anyone shut out. but everything is based on merit, right? And I think that's where you get the divide politically in this and that, is how much do we need to push this and how much do we need to do that? And some people think because of all these reasons we have to push it, and other people are like, no, we got to do this, and then maybe there would be no change. So it's like you can see arguments on both sides, but I think it's always interesting when people go, well, how do you create an atmosphere like what you're saying? Hey, I didn't have a DEI officer, but I have a diverse workforce because we just are open to people. And if you're good at your job and everything's open, you're going to naturally get some of that, right? And I've seen, there was one I was talking with, because when I was doing speaking and training more heavily, there was this is a perfect example. This was in a small town in Iowa, and they had got someone come in from the DEI thing. They're like, we want there to be, 12% representation of minorities in these positions. And they're like, how are we going to do that? There are only 6% of the population here. I don't care. I want to do it. Well, that's the problem. They actually got, and what was the lady was telling me, which was so funny, they got a DEI expert from outside that contradicted the leader and said, you guys are right on target. You're at 6%. I did all the demographics. I looked at the stuff. This is great. It made that leader that tried to come in and force ideas that didn't make any sense from like a math perspective to like just be the thing. And it's like, no, we're doing a good job. Maybe we could do better. Are there ways? But the person who was the expert actually confirmed that they were doing great as they were, and they didn't need to arbitrarily do it just based on feelings that didn't make sense. Those are the kind of things that will frustrate people. So you get people frustrated, like, how am I supposed to do that? I can't like force to look for people that don't exist. But then also, are there things like people do have the big, one of the big words would be like unconscious bias. Literally everybody has that. You can pick any person on the planet and they've got their hangups, they've got their beliefs, they have their experiences that happen. And so they all operate. So it is good to question that. It's good to think like, am I making a decision based on logic, based on reason, or is it based on something where I'm doing it arbitrarily? So those are the conversations that are good. But at the same point, you have to have such a good argument that it stands on its own. It doesn't need to be forced. I don't have to not question it. I should be able to question things, and it should be okay without being demonized. And you've definitely, whenever it happens, especially at the big companies, there was the big one I remember with Google, where the guy was a very liberal leaning. I mean, if you've ever worked with any programmers, typically, and especially Silicon Valley and whatnot, this is a very, liberal type group of people. All the programmers I ever worked with, they definitely lean that way. It's more of like the elite mindset, high thinking, like how could we make a utopia, this type of thing.
Which, by the way, Randy, I'm not interrupting, but like that makes sense because they're a programmer. They're in their mind, I can create the perfect program. Just like if you were to go, and again, left leaning, you take that to its very end degree. That's communism, right? And that is at the core of communism is central planning, and that is a programmer. So that makes sense when you look at the persona of who you're talking about,
right?
And
that's your
how they achieve exactly. Yes,
how the world makes sense to them. But there was the one guy who got fired, and he was pointing out some things, and it's funny. Then I took that. I had a conversation with someone. So he got fired because he was like, hey, we don't have the people. If you're arbitrarily forcing this, you have to have the people in the workforce. He was bringing up some stuff. They didn't like it. And he wasn't trying to be rude. He was just being a questioning guy. And he definitely would have said, I vote Democrat, right? But he got fired because of his views on it. I took that to someone who was like the head of, I think she happened to be, I think she had said that too. So she happened to be, very left leaning. She worked with the Girl Scouts, and they were trying to get STEM. And I said, hey, that's awesome. If you want to get more women in these different XYZ and programmers, you got to start as kids, and you've got to get the pool. And I get that maybe there were things where that was stereotypical, like you can't do that. That's not a girl thing. I get that. There could be some things like that. But right now, there's like nobody trying to stop girls from learning how to program, as far as I know. Could there be some dads out there that don't? I don't know. But like in general, the door is kind of open for it. Get the interest at the young age level and then increase the pool. I think that's what his complaint was. He's like, there's not a pool for what you guys are trying to force, and you're excluding people so you can force what you want. And that's not right either. Don't exclude people because of whatever. Work and fix the problem. The problem is you need a bigger pool of candidates. Go create the pool. Where should you do that? At the 10-year-old level. Get the 10-year-olds that from different areas that might not have been encouraged to do it before, get them into it. That's how you fix problems. And that's worth going, well, why don't we have it? Well, we don't care why we don't have it. We're just going to force what we want. It's like, no, fix the problem. You're putting a Band-Aid on something, you create resistance. You're not thinking through the whole scope of things. Like, go to the actual problem and try to fix it. So,
Randy, okay, so really quick, I got to hop in here because
we're not gonna get to business. That's all I have to say. This is gonna be all politics. But hey, whatever.
This isn't even necessarily politics. This is just a societal issue, right? You're actually hitting on. I just did an episode with one of my good buddies, Michael Pickens, and he does a lot of like mental reprogramming. And one of the things that we talked about, so my episode was called the Ozempic era, right? Now, I'm not picking on anybody who's taken part in Ozempic, but the idea of
real quick, because they
might so Ozempic is this shot that's been going around, and basically it helps facilitate weight loss. Now, by the way, as a guy who used to weigh 385 pounds and lost 180 pounds of fat, I know a thing or two about weight loss. You don't just treat the symptom, right? You have to treat the root cause of the problem. And unfortunately, Ozempic is very much one of those things that just treats a symptom versus the root cause. Now, going back, Randy, what you were talking about earlier, let's talk about the education system, right? Why are maybe girls not having as much opportunities in the STEM field? Is it because of the way that they're being taught in earlier education? And let's look at education. Is it education, or is the education system we have in place based not on education, but rather on the idea of schooling, which goes back to the Prussian model of schooling? That's actually what it's called. And it was the idea of how do we take a populace and prepare them to go into the real world to be good little factory workers, right? And if you think back to your experience back when you were going through school, does that not represent your experience in public education? And exactly, and that speaks to, we are not training our kids or educating our kids to actually become educated. We're teaching our kids how to be good little rule followers and task doers, right? Like, you want to go to the factory and be a good little factory drone, you're going to be great after graduating the public education system. Great, 2 thumbs up. But if you look at, I forget the specific numbers, but if you look in Silicon Valley, 80%, I believe, was the number of all Silicon Valley CEOs did not graduate from a traditional Prussian government schooling model, but rather they went through a Montessori schooling model where they themselves could, instead of being force-fed a curriculum that they could not give 2 flying flips about, but instead are actually able to invest their time, energy, and efforts into areas that they find personal value and they get enjoyment from. That then helps create those incentive structures to help promote them forward, right? So we go back to the idea of a meritocracy, right? You're passionate about something, you start to work harder on something, and you become better at that thing versus the competition. Now, all of a sudden, you have a skill, a service that you can bring to the marketplace that has value, it has tangible value. And now you start to see, like, oh, this is how markets are created. It's not by some guy sitting, in a ivory tower saying, we really need to have more doctors in our neighborhood, so we're going to dictate more doctors. No, that's not how this happens. How it happens is you have a bunch of sick people in your community and kids growing up who see all these sick people and say, I wish I could help make my community better. And then of that group of kids, maybe a handful of them actually start to focus more on medicine and on healthcare. And then maybe a few of those kids actually go off to school, and then they set up their clinics in that hometown, and they're able to make the world of difference, right? That is how it happens. And whenever we see how, things aren't the way we want them to be, the answer is not to wave your proverbial magic wand to make it so, but rather what we talked about today. Ask questions, right? How did we get to here? And are we doing the right things right now from a structure standpoint to help position and put kids in place to actually do best, to focus on the things they care about, that they're passionate about? Like, Randy, I'm sorry, I'm just going to say it. My 4-year degree from my college has been sitting on my wall, and that's the most value it's gotten, is a nice wall ornament. In terms of my actual application to my real life, rarely, if ever, am I using it. Now, there are things, as a political science major, so there are things I use every single day in terms of just theory and ideology and trying to be
podcast right there. That's the podcast.
There you go. But like, when you talk about the average person who goes to college, why? What are you going to college for? Because everybody else is? Because you were told that this is what, you graduate high school and you go to college for 4 years and you live a little bit, you learn life, and then what? You go off to real life and you're $150,000, $200,000 in debt.
Oh my goodness.
because
I
that's the
know.
way that we're told to do it? That's the way the system's supposed to work? Or is it because people actually want, and in this case, the answer is no. People didn't just go to college because they're like, oh, I really am passionate about my liberal arts degree. Nobody's really passionate about liberal arts. Like, people are going to college just to say they get a piece of paper and hang out with friends. And I'm sorry, that's the truth. So instead of saying, hey, maybe we should go ahead and magic wand forgive everybody's student loans and make college a public good, let's start asking, I know, here we go. I'm going to put my hard butt hat on. Do we actually need everybody to go to college? And that's a question we need to be able to actually ask, right? Like, not everybody needs to go to college, because not everybody needs an education from college to do a certain skill or bring a certain service to the marketplace. Like, nobody taught you how to do podcasting. Nobody, I mean, well, Chris Spangle taught me how to do podcasting, but
Here we
nobody,
are.
there you go. But like, nobody was saying, Brian, you're going to be a podcaster and you need to fill this role, because this role didn't exist 15 years ago. And that's the difference.
No, you've hit on something. We could go deep into that one, but we do need to rethink the value that we put on college, in the sense, like, you are not valuable unless you go and do that. And that is only what responsible people do. You actually should be following, hey, what is your vocation? What are you passionate about? What is maybe your calling? Because people might go and get degrees. You know how many people I know that are like lawyers or something where they went engineers and they do a totally different thing, like that hyper specific degree, and then they left it because they hate the environment. They didn't even know.
I was a lawyer, and now I decided I'm going to go start a restaurant.
A pizza, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. I worked with someone that was in sales, and they were a lawyer. They had a lawyer degree. They could have continued. They pivoted and went into sales. It's like, how interesting, right? And then I knew one other person was actually the same thing. Maybe it's just the lawyer profession. It's grueling. I don't know. Someone will have to vote in there. But another person, they were going through school for that, and then they pivoted out of it. It's because there's so much pressure that you only have value if you do these certain things. And at the end of the day, whoever's putting that pressure on you, maybe it's all in your head, maybe it's your parents, they're not going to be the one working it day in and day out. And you might be a person who's physical. You might be someone who wants to turn a wrench. We need more plumbers, to be honest with you. We got too many people that are about to get outsourced by AI, and we ain't got nobody to fix the wiring. Like,
Randy, I got to jump in here too. Could you imagine back in like 1907, right, that there was a college course to be a milkman?
Is that real? Are you saying that? Is that a real?
No, I'm just saying. Just imagine though. Like, imagine there was, right? And that in order to be a milkman, you had to go get this 2-4-year degree. Okay. Let's just imagine that. The milkman position doesn't exist anymore. Like, it's not even a profession. So the fact that somebody back in the day maybe could have gone to, I don't know if this is real or not, but like could have gone to college for a milkman degree, right? Like, okay, yeah, it's a little rough of an example, but the point is, why are we bringing generations of kids off to these, institutions of higher education to get degrees for hyper-specific areas that frankly might not exist in 10, 15, 50 years, right? Like, I'm going to pick on my dad for a second. Hey, Dad, my dad got a degree back when he was a college student in animal husbandry, which, what?
Takes care of cows or what? Horses?
No. So my dad was a farmer, right? My dad was a farmer, and it was how do you help promote the next generation of livestock? So helping bring animals together to do the act of love and to make more animals, right? That was a degree that my dad got. Now, my dad is not a farmer anymore. My dad is an elections commissioner. He does board of elections stuff for every primary and general election in his home county. My dad's degree helped him at the time, but does it have value for his job now? No. And this goes to, I think, what we talked about earlier, Randy, is that we have to really rethink college just across the board. It's not just the next step. It's not like, okay, you go to elementary school, you go to middle school, you go to high school, and then you go to college. No, like let's take a step back and re-examine, does everybody need to go to college? Because there are certain jobs that not only do you not need to have a college degree, I dare say sometimes having the college degree can hurt you, because here's the dirty, rotten secret is if I'm hiring somebody and I see a 4-year degree on their resume, that means nothing to me. Back 50 years ago, that might have meant something, right? It meant, okay, the person has a 4-year degree from Harvard. That means that in order to get to Harvard, they have to have a certain standard that they're hitting. And in order to be successful and graduate from Harvard, they have to maintain a certain threshold and maintain certain academics. But now I get that degree and I see that on the resume. That degree doesn't tell me anything. That degree tells me that the person decided to go to college after graduating high school for something, for fun, for education.
They could be
something
a C plus whatever, right? So they might have skirted right by doing the bare minimum, but they got the degree.
The scariest quote I ever heard was, "Don't forget, even your doctor could have been last place in their class to graduate, but they still passed."
Oh, yeah.
It's true though. Like, yeah, well, but like if we're in a situation where we have so many people who just they look at college as just the next step. I mean, yeah, it creates an artificial market. You have all of a sudden college prices skyrocketing because, well, we're told that in order to be a successful adult, you have to go to college, right? So if that's just the next step, well, of course, colleges can start to charge arbitrary amounts for their tuition because there's a demand that's 100% created by an artificial force. And oh, by the way, government is going to go ahead and pay these loans to the colleges. So the colleges aren't afraid. They're not afraid of not getting their money because they know the dollars are going to come in. Who has to bear that burden? It's the actual student. So it's a double-edged sword on the student side. There's zero risk for the college and the government handout side. So you kind of see now how we got to this system where it is today and how the incentive structures don't work. And this goes back to what we're very first thing we talked about, Randy, is the way the incentive structures work is if there's a problem that needs solved and I have a solution, then the incentive structures per just basic economics of supply and demand will dictate what that price is. But if there is artificial demand and an artificial supply, guess what I can do? Artificially increase the price. And that is exactly what college has gotten to today.
Well, I mean, human nature is a very tricky thing, and the way you incentivize it and the things you punish and the things you reward, you have to be very careful with them. Just getting people behind the idea of, hey, wouldn't it be great if you didn't have your student loans anymore? I know one person who's working at a job. It's like the stereotypical thing where they're $200,000 in debt and they're working for whatever, like $15 an hour job. And then whenever they want to do something, they're so afraid to do it that they can't do it without getting another degree or going back to school. So it's like this mindset that if I want to do something, I have to first go do this. And that's how they've gotten themselves into all this trouble because they keep going and getting degrees for things they're not using for markets that there aren't. And then they're huge in debt. So now if someone comes in and wipes it, how did that create any value for anyone? And then what if you just have people like, I know people, they'll go for a little bit, they'll decide it's not for them. They don't want to pay for something they're not going to use. Well, if it's paid for you now, might as well hang out. It's a good time. We're drinking beer. We're having parties on the weekends. All my friends are doing it. It's like you do have to be very careful how you incentivize humans because almost all humans will take advantage of it. I mean, I'd be surprised if there was anybody that had college debt that was against it that also wouldn't be on the other side going, yeah, but I'll let you pay it off if you want to, right? Like humans are selfish that way and 100%. They will take advantage. And then the people who said, you know what? That's not for me. I don't want to do that. I want to go work with my hands. I'm going to go get a 2-year degree. I've got it paid off, or I'm going to go into an apprenticeship program. They look at that and go, hey, wait a minute. Like, I didn't make that choice. You made that choice for me. But then there's so much difference in life. In one area and figuring that out as early. Like if you want to be outdoors, boom, that cuts you off to this type of jobs and you're in this area. Now, what do you like doing? What are you good at? Let's get you as close as possible because then you're going to be happy. And I think you had this, I saw this in one of your podcasts. What's the riches are in the niches, the niches? Is that a Brian quote? I think who you probably stole it from someone,
I probably borrowed that from someone who borrowed it from someone. So I am not going to claim originality on the riches are in the niches.
But it's true. So it's your quote. It's your quote in my book.
But it's true though. Like if you look at, it's funny. I just had a call yesterday talking just about this very thing. You talk about think of people who are hyper focused in a specific field. And here, Randy, let's play a game. Like think of we like football. Think of like who would you look to as like the quarterback guru?
Like who is, well, it's obviously going to be one of the top people. It's funny, until the recent, breakup that we had, you always got to go with Aaron Rodgers. That's my tribe. That's my team. It's Aaron Rodgers. Now he's betrayed me. So he's nothing to me. He's nothing to me.
We'll let Aaron Rodgers, we'll give Aaron Rodgers the opportunity. Does that work?
Okay.
So Aaron Rodgers,
why not?
He's let's say, we're 10 years in the future. And Randy, congratulations. You were recently appointed the head coach of the Green Bay Packers. Congratulations again. Okay. You now have the opportunity. You can hire a quarterback coach. Do you want to go and hire Jason Witten, who is my all-time favorite tight end for the Dallas Cowboys? Or would you want to hire Aaron Rodgers, who is your all-time, well, maybe one of the all-time leading quarterbacks for the Packers, but one of the all-time greats for the Packers, right? Who would you want to pick?
You're going to pick, obviously, whoever has experience having done it, that's been there and can walk somebody new who's never been there exactly how they did it.
Why? Because they lived it, right? And that right there speaks to the riches are in the niches, because Aaron Rodgers has seen things that no other position in the NFL could see, and nobody else in the regular world would be able to see. He has seen what it takes to be a successful, winning NFL quarterback, and he has seen what happens to other people when they do not pay attention and they do not do the necessary actions to be a professional quarterback. They don't end up in the league too often. That's why the NFL's nickname for a while was the not for long league, because you could be in the NFL for 2 years and then you're going and serving sandwiches at Subway. So as Aaron Rodgers, let's say it was down to Aaron Rodgers versus Jason Witten, and you're trying to think, okay, who am I going to hire to be this quarterback coach? Aaron Rodgers has much more of an argument on his side to say, listen, Randy, I won NFL MVP, 3 times, 4 times. I'm a Super Bowl winning quarterback. I can make silly throws across my body. I can still win a game. Still win a game against the Dallas Cowboys, even though Dez caught it. Just saying. That still hurts, by the way. 2014, that will still forever be like the worst travesty in NFL officiating history. But I'm not going to let that ruin our conversation today, Randy.
We're going to need a clip. I need someone to get a clip of that. We got to watch it right now just to traumatize you.
Don't do that. I'll just end the show. No, but in all seriousness, right? Like Aaron Rodgers versus all-time great Jason Witten, like probably one of the best tight ends in NFL history. Aaron Rodgers has the ability to ask for more money because he's going to be able to bring something that only he has context and perspective of. Or at the very least, only a few people like him. Maybe him, Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, maybe Patrick Mahomes, but he's still kind of young. He's still learning, even though he's won 3 Super Bowls. But like there are folks you can learn from. And you're going to want to go towards the people who are more focused in that specific area. And when you are someone teaching that, now you can ask for more, because not just the value that you're bringing, but it's only value that you can bring. And I think that speaks to where a lot of people also, just by and large, they get so frustrated when they look at their employer, they look at their lot in life, and they're like, well, why am I not being compensated X? Or, darn it, Randy, I deserve more. I deserve better. Okay, show me, right? And this goes back to what we were talking about. It's not the piece of paper. It's not that shiny degree that you got that's saying I deserve this, but rather, what are you doing with that shiny degree to help bring value? Like if you got the shiny degree for $200,000, but you're bringing $1 million worth of value to every single customer, great investment. But if you paid $200,000 for the degree and you can get $100, $200 maybe from people actually valuing that degree, it might not have been a good investment. And instead of saying, poor you, I'm going to forgive that investment. Just like in business, you learn from mistakes and you learn from successes. You learn what works and what doesn't work. That doesn't mean that the pain isn't real. The pain is absolutely real, but the pain is the thing that we learn from. The pain is the thing that we use the teachable moment to avoid in the future. Pain itself is not a bad thing. When I
No.
lost 180 pounds, I felt pain every single day, but it was in pursuit of something bigger, well, smaller in this case, but something better, right? Something better for me from a health standpoint, from a mental health standpoint, and from a physical standpoint. And yet I felt pain. I go to the gym 6 days a week. I feel the pain when I lift a heavy weight, but it's in pursuit of something more. And when you lose, it's a pain that you feel to help you learn from where you went wrong and what you can do better for next time. So it doesn't hurt as much, or best case scenario, Randy, it doesn't hurt at all.
I think that we could do a whole podcast literally just on pain and mindset, because people have this idea that because their body and maybe their mind even naturally wants to avoid pain and seek pleasure, that there's no purpose of having pain. But that is exactly where you learn the most. It is where you figure out who you are. It's where you see and really learn a lesson. If you could be in pain and someone comes with a magic wand and removes that, you don't learn the lesson. You don't even appreciate it properly. Like, there's a lot of things you have to be very careful how you incentivize people. We think about what's the stereotypical thing of like the rich kid that gets everything they want and they're never happy and they're spoiled rotten and they're just a terrible human. Well, you got to watch how you do that with humans. How do you incentivize them? And what lesson were they supposed to learn that you circumvented? Now, let me just take that away. You were supposed to figure out something, but I think that's too much for you. I know better than you. You made a decision. You don't have to live with it anymore. And you can think about that. We talked about being fathers. It's like, that's something I think about, right? You can't be so soft in the idea that, oh, there's no consequences. Like, I talked about this when we were doing trainings for generations. Like, it's going in a diversion, but like, the world was very tough for silent and boomer generations. Their parents and things were very tough. They were harsh on them. They didn't like that. So they pivoted in how they parented. But then they also complained that, oh, our kids are soft. It's like, of course, the world is so much easier. Everything in life is easier than it has ever been before. There's no delayed gratification. It's instant gratification. You get mad if the Wi-Fi isn't working on the airplane. Like, oh, we didn't even have that 3 or 4 years ago. Doesn't matter.
You're on an aluminum tube flying 700 miles an hour, and you're upset you can't get 2 bars on your Wi-Fi?
Pretty much. And we have changed the world. We have changed things, and we've made things easier for everyone. You know what's interesting is nobody's happier. Mental health is a crisis. People can't deal with life. It's just going to get worse. You see people freaking out about all kinds of things. Take an iPad away from a toddler, you see an absolute meltdown, right? They didn't even have iPads before. You got to play with a stick and mud. And like, I'm not a person where it's just like, the old ways are the only ways. They were the best ways. But you have to look at the situation and go, oh, I see how we've created this. Like, you had super highly critical parents that were just like, tough love was the only thing, and tough was the emphasis on it. Love was on the other. Then they went all love, and then everybody's having mental health crisis. Well, when you dealt with things being tough, you just get stronger. When you work out, you get stronger. Your body naturally, like, it's a snowball too, right? It was super hard at you said you were 380 pounds. Mm-hmm. Like, it's hard to do anything. But as you build muscle, your body burns at a higher rate, which means burning fat is easier. As you get stronger and do it, you start to enjoy it. Like, there's so many things about that journey and things being tough. It's more satisfying. If you just had the Ozempic, and I'll have to watch that one. I saw you do that one of your podcast. But of course, the easy solution, which is not without its cost, like, there's no magic wand. Things aren't magic. There's a cost. You might say it's worth paying the cost or whatever, but in general, like, the other way, the hard way, is the best way. And no, we don't like that. Where's the magic way? Well, there is no magic. We don't have magic in this world. Whenever you wave the wand and do what you consider magic, there's a huge cost over here. Yes. So that's an example to say. It's the same with making choices. Like,
by the way, Randy,
live with a bad choice.
I don't mean to do this, but like, everything in life at the end of the day is kind of economics, right? So in economics, we talk about the term opportunity cost. So you're making a decision. What is that costing you from, and it could be a bunch of different factors, right? It could be economic factors. It could be personal factors, and you're losing out on something, right? And we as a society, I think we've gotten way too, I guess, comfortable with the idea that we don't have to have opportunity cost. Like it used to be, okay, you want to sit down and write out an essay. You're a college kid, that midnight deadline's coming up, and you had to sit down and you had to work hard for 3 hours to get that essay written and formatted properly just so you can get it in at midnight and get the A. Versus maybe there's an easy button now and you can sacrifice the effort and you can sacrifice the attention you need to give to crafting a great essay by just having ChatGPT write it, right? And you tell ChatGPT your prompt, you hit that submit button, boom, you got a brand new essay, and now you present that to your teacher, you get the great score, and you're on your way. But what happened, Randy, right? What happened? Yeah, you hit the ChatGPT button, and you created this essay that helped you move forward, but you lost on something. You lost on the creating of an argument. You lost on the structure of an argument. You lost out on how to present words in such a way that help make your point more, not just articulate, but also help the reader understand the argument you're making and help embrace that argument. You're just deferring to a robot. And what happens if the robot doesn't do a good job? You don't know. You don't know the robot did a bad job because you have nothing to base it on. So now all of a sudden you fast forward 10 years and you find yourself maybe in a job interview, and the job interviewer starts giving you some tough questions and ask you to present, what's a tough time that you had where you had to, build something and make it better and you got pushback from a coworker. I don't know. And you were like, how do I articulate this? How do I present this in a manner that not only answers his question, but I can tell a story, I can elicit a narrative, I can help add in, supporting details, facts, and figures, and make not just a strong argument, but a compelling argument to get him to say, oh, I get it. I see your point, versus just okay, I heard you. Great. Next question. And that is where I think we are as a society really starting to miss out, is when we're hitting that proverbial easy button, right? Go back to, I think it was Office Depot or Office Max, that was easy button, right?
Yeah.
That was easy. We've embraced that as a society, and we keep on looking for the easy button, whether it's ChatGPT doing your essay, whether it's Ozempic helping you lose a couple 100 pounds, whether it's name the thing, right? We are neglecting to acknowledge that for every easy button we hit, there is a really hard button down the road that we are going to have to hit at some point. And the problem is that your hand is it's weighted down and it's just constantly going slower and slower until you have to hit that this is going to be hard button, because you took the easy way. It's just like a drug, right, man? Like, oh, I had a bad day, man, my boss was a jerk and I lost this huge account. I'm going to go home and I'm going to drink a 10-pack of booze and drink, I don't know, a handle of vodka. I don't drink anymore, so I'm just kind of guessing what we do nowadays. But like, that's right. But you get that short-term, I say satisfaction, but that short-term fix, right? You feel good, you feel numb for a little bit, and then what happens? Hangover. I mean, that is the perfect example of opportunity cost. You're sacrificing your good feeling for that short-term fix when you take the substance. We're doing that as a society. We're taking the short-term fix in lieu of long-term health. We're avoiding the hard conversations now for fear of the hard conversation, but we are having to pay for that in the future. And right now, actually, the hard conversations we're supposed to be having are hard conversations that were created by the lack of hard conversations 15, 20, 40, 50 years ago. And now we're paying for it now. Just like you mentioned, the boomer parents who they said, wow, man, life was really tough for us. We will make life a little bit more easy for our kids. And now, their kids, they're like, who raised these softies? What's happening? They don't know how to screw in a light bulb without getting electrocuted. Like, what are we doing here? And it goes to this cycle, right? Where I think we're at a point right now, Randy, we have an opportunity. We have technology that brings us together in ways that we could never have been brought together before. We have ample opportunities now to talk about issues that were frankly taboo issues 15 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago. We talked about one of them earlier today, but like, we are now at a point where not only do I think we have the opportunity to talk about these issues, but we also get the chance to talk about issues from the past that we never really addressed. We never really focused on, because believe it or not, I know you believe it, but for folks listening, the issues that we're dealing with today, they weren't issues that were created yesterday. I mean, we talked about the education system here in America. That education system literally goes back to the 1900s, late 1800s with the Prussian schooling model, right? Like, that's how old some of these conversations go back to, and beyond, right? Farther and further away. But unless we're able to take a step and say, like, hey, time out. Are we teaching our kids the best way possible? Like, God bless Gary V, because Gary Vaynerchuk, for anybody playing along the game, right? Like, he is one of the loudest voices outside of politics who is like, kids don't need to go to college. And he's like, not every kid. And he's been a very loud voice, not just talking about that, but talking to parents, the people who are actually helping their kids make these decisions of what's next. And he's doing this not because, it's some self-interested thing that he's going to be getting value from, but because he is seeing a very real problem and he's trying to help start a conversation. That's just one example, but there are lots of things, whether it's education, foreign policy, cultural issues, you name the issue that we are facing as a country right now. I can almost guarantee, Randy, these issues did not pop up overnight. They started decades ago, generations ago, countries thousands of miles away, and they're still rearing their ugly head. So until we're able to start addressing root causes instead of constantly doing this Ozempic type approach, treating symptoms, we're going to consistently have symptoms to treat. So let's stop treating symptoms. Let's start dealing with the actual root causes of these problems and offer tangible solutions versus quick fixes that make us feel good for a short term, only to have the problem rear its ugly head 20 years down the road, bigger and badder than ever before.
You could literally put that into anything. Like, humans' nature is to avoid problems as long as they can, to kick the can down the road, to not confront something head on. And it goes on and on and on and on, and it can stem really far back. Yeah, I do think of some of the things when I hear, like, they were doing this in the 70s. So I'm like, man, this stuff they were screwing up stuff before I was born. Like,
hold on. Are you ready for this, Randy? This blew me away. All right. I'm listening yesterday to this old interview with a top climate scientist in the 1970s. You know what the number one fear of from a climate standpoint was in the 1970s? Global cooling. Global cooling. Yeah. So here's what they were going to do. This still makes me laugh, and it shouldn't, but it does. There was a proposal to pump chemicals into the atmosphere, specifically sulfuric acid, to go into the atmosphere to help refract some of the sun's rays from getting through the atmosphere, with a small little, consequence of having acid rain. Even though it's a little bit of acid rain, but it would be worth it because it would help stop global cooling. But wait, hold on. What are we dealing with today? What's the big bugaboo from every single millennial and college student I see? Global warming. And I stop and I say, wait, guys, hold the phone. Are your solutions you're presenting much like our sulfuric acid solutions from the 1970s? Because if so, I'm just going to say it, maybe the solution you're bringing to the table is actually going to be causing problems down the road that next generations will have to deal with. So again, it is also very indicative on us to take a step back and also control what we can control. I had one SDR named David back in the day. I love David. Still one of my best buddies. And David used to come into my office and he'd sit down. He'd be like, I was like, what, David? He's like, Brian, like XYZ is happening and I just don't know what to do. And I'm like, okay, talk to me about X, Y, and Z. Like, what, how does this impact you? And he's like, oh, well, it doesn't impact me directly, but it's one of my friends. And then he starts going through, and I'm like, okay, so how can you control this situation? And he'd be like, I don't think I really can. And I was like, then,
but you let it
yeah, then what are we doing here? Control what you can control. Yes. Do your best. Forget the rest. Like, we are there. In the grand scheme of things, we are but ants on this home we call Earth, right? And the arrogance that we can dictate our global temperature one way or another, good or bad, on a whim.
Yes.
Which, I mean, we are seeing we can do that, but like the fact that we can put it in the way we want it to go, right? That we have some superior intellect, that we can just make the world exactly as we want it to be. That right there scares the crap out of me because the best intentioned folks can have the worst outcomes in their policies actually being enacted. You could have the best utopian vision and it can turn into complete catastrophe just by one person not doing things right. Here's a real life example, right? By the way, so you guys don't think I'm just talking at my butt here. You go back to communist China back in the 1950s with Mao Zedong. I had a lady on my show a while back. Her name is Lily Tang Williams. She's running for Congress right now, actually up in New Hampshire. She born and raised in Mao's communist China. And one of the things that they did back in communist China was sparrows. Sparrows were evil. They were bad. They were killing crops. They were horrible. So the great leader Mao said, no sparrows. You see sparrows, you kill them, you get them off your property. So what ended up happening? Led to a famine, right? Because sparrows were actually played a very important role in the ecosystem there. So them moving these sparrows out of the way, even though it was done in the best of intentions, ended up leading to the worst of consequences with literally millions of people starving to death in communist China. So it could be a communist. It could be a right-wing conservative. It doesn't matter who it is that's putting these do-good policies into action. What matters is that we have to take a step back and acknowledge we can't control everything. Even if we have the best of intentions, we can't make things exactly the way we want them to be. We have to work in this environment of conflicting ideas, conflicting values, conflicting interests, and bring a solution to the table that makes the most sense to solve a problem, but also being able to do so without the big, forceful one-size-fits-all approach. And that, I think right there, the competing arena of ideas, the marketplace of ideas. Here, you know what, Randy? We're going to bring it back to business because this is a business podcast.
You got it. Someone's been waiting this whole time for a business tip. They're going to get it.
When you look at the marketplace, not just of ideas, but the marketplace of goods and services and products, like it is a competition. I'm in the contact center space. I work for an amazing company called Sharpen CX. We're basically the David and Goliath story. We're the Davids in the contact center space because a lot of the old legacy players, they approach things much through this one-size-fits-all approach. But what if, Randy, some arbitrary third party was like, you know what? XYZ contact center solution is the best contact center solution in the world. So you know what we're going to do? Every company in the world has to use their contact center solution for their business. I have some hesitation. I have some red flags that pop up because when you do that, now what you're doing is you're eliminating competition. You're eliminating the marketplace of ideas. And instead, you're creating a situation where you do only have that one-size-fits-all approach. Now, I think it makes more sense to have an open and fair competition amongst competitors because I want to have the best solution. We at Sharpen, we're creating the contact center of tomorrow and creating contact centers that people love or at the very least don't hate as much. Whereas the old players, they have their solution in place. They have their legacy customers in place. As long as they can, hit the button, it turns on, and they're able to get their MRR every single month, they don't care. But we care. And that, I think, speaks to when you have a solution, whether you're an individual or you're a business and you're bringing real tangible value to your market, you have the chance not just to change the way the marketplace acts, but it's going to benefit you personally, financially, but also it's going to help better your customers, better your environment, better your society. Like I would much rather have a world where I can pick up the phone and have my issues addressed from, name the company you're calling into, have it addressed in 1-2 minutes, if that, because you're able to have all the self-service options you wanted, or you're able to talk to a friendly agent who is able to know all your needs, wants, desires based on past interactions, or whatever it may be that you have for your solution, that you're bringing unique value to the table. That's something that we can all look to and say that's a tangible good. So let's create an environment where we can have more competition, where we can have more of these discussions and disagreements, right? Because when you have a disagreement, you get to dig into the why behind that disagreement. Is it a real disagreement, or is it an ism disagreement? I went full circle, but like, let's really focus on that, right?
Oh,
it's like I've been doing this for a while. But like, let's really try to do that. Let's have these conversations that can be uncomfortable, can be, challenging and controversial, but it gives us the opportunity to really understand who it is that we're talking to, why they believe what they believe. And if we can find some semblance of common ground to move forward, let's do that.
I'm a little late to the party on it, but the boom ticker got hit right there. It was a little late, but
boom. I love it.
No, you have so many things in there. Like, again, we could unpack it. We could go in 100 different directions. I think the biggest thing people should look at is, where is the money? Where is the incentive for solutions? Because I think one of the biggest concerns we should have from an environment is how we're poisoning our water. But that doesn't, for whatever reason, nobody cares about that. And that's the thing that's going to cause the most problems. Like, it's people want to focus on something for whatever reason. It's like the biggest, hottest buzzword and everybody's talking about it. But it's like, poisoning your water is going to give you very immediate, drastic things. How about we go clean up? We put all these plastics in things. How about all these microplastics? How about everyone's like, I can't believe that's there. But they also go, well, who are the countries that are contributing to that? They're like, well, it must be America. No, there's big industrial companies that are, they're practically countries that they just don't care. And they put all their garbage, and it goes, and that you can tell by the currents and where it swirls from. And so we have to figure out how to deal something with that. But nobody wants to do that. They want to talk about this one thing, and then it almost just seems like it's like, where can they make their money on it? But anyway, that is it. We're gonna have to call it that. We got into hardly any business. I still think that last one that you tried to say was business was really more philosophy, that you put a business dress on a little bit.
I tried.
No, you know what? And that's the thing. You never know where a conversation is going to go, and hopefully people are like, this is interesting. That's intriguing. I thought we'd get to contact centers. I thought we'd get, because it's an area I'm passionate about, customer success. I want people to have amazing things. I want them to leverage AI. I want people to upgrade their customer service people to get them to do more, because AI is coming for them. I mean, that's the whole. We'll have to have a part 2 at some point.
Absolutely.
As you might have said in a podcast I watched. It's going to have to be a part 2. We'll try to be focused on customer service, but it's going to come back to some sort of political winds that are blowing at the time or something like that. But it's kind of fun, because if people, even if they disagree, hopefully they're like, you know what, I could have a conversation with either of those gentlemen, and maybe they might believe differently. Maybe they'd agree with exactly what I say, but it would just be a conversation. I'm not going to yell at anybody about it. I don't think you're going to yell at anybody because they believe differently. And that would be, to sum this up, of what's the point of it. I can believe the exact opposite solution, and that's okay. Maybe you'll provide something that I adjust that, and I'm welcoming that. And so anyway, that's hopefully what we've accomplished here today.
So Randy, I must say to that point, one of the biggest critiques I have consistently gotten from my audience over 6.5 years of doing this podcast is, Brian, you're way too nice to your guests. And I'm like, what? And they go, you didn't push back hard enough. And I'm like, that's not my job here. My job is to have a conversation, not to engage in an argument or debate. Now, granted, there have absolutely been shows where I've gone through and have had more of a debate, but that's not the goal of my show. The goal is to have really thoughtful conversations with people across the board, people we agree with, people we disagree with, because guess what? That's life. So if we're not able to do that in the confines of a political / non-political, I mean, heck, my show, it's political, but like a lot of the stuff we talk about is overtly non-political. It's just like, here's a problem. Can we bring a solution to the table outside of needing to have, Mr. or Mrs. City Councilman or Mr. or Mrs. Congressman give us the green light? And if that's the case, then like, I don't even see it necessarily being a political show in some instances. Now, I know it's political. I know we talk politics, but like at the end of the day, I think we have to get out, and this is where I started, get out of the isms, right? Start focusing on what do we need to do to make this world a better place? And it starts with us having conversations, especially with people we disagree with. And if you find yourself like, oh, I got to talk to that person, I don't want to, like, that's more reason why you should. So maybe start small, right? Like go online and like try to have a dialogue. I know, with someone instead of trying to score online points. Or if you see somebody you disagree with, instead of going to the comment and saying, "You're such an idiot," go into their messages and DM them and say, "Hey, listen, I don't understand and I want to understand. Help me understand your position." I guarantee you will have so much more of a productive dialogue with that person. But the key underlying rule is you have to make sure that both parties are doing so in good faith. You have to like, if you're going into a conversation and you have some like hidden motive or intention, and that's always like right below the surface, that's not you going in with good intentions. That's you going in with a motive. And likewise, don't go to somebody who, their job is to go out and sell whatever thing that they're promoting. Like, somebody who's asking a genuine question, or they're like, "Hey, I think we have a solution to a problem. Let's talk about this." Like, go in and approach it that way. You're going to have way more success. You're going to feel better because you're going to understand where the person's coming from. And hey, it might change your mind, and that's okay. So I hope that I got some value. Yeah.
Sales and everybody, or politics and sales, everybody is in some form of selling. You're selling your kids on when to go to sleep at night. You're selling your spouse that you're the best person that they could get. You're selling people on a product. Doesn't matter. It's persuasion and whatnot. You are not persuasive when you hit people over the head, when you hammer an idea, when you berate them. Imagine if you did that with a customer. You think that solution is good? That solution's been wrong for this long. And they're going to go, "Yeah, well, screw you. I'm going to do whatever I want." Which is what people do in politics, but then they waste their time doing that same thing to other people. Like, isn't your goal that you would like more people to come to your way of thinking? In sales, would you not want your customer to buy your product because you believe it's the best one? Do you not believe your solution might be the best for the environment, or best for government, or best for kids? How are you going to communicate that to them? And first thing is, they got to know that you're open to having that conversation, and their ideas and whatever they currently believe is good. And you can add to it. You can build on it. You're there and welcoming. So there's the connection, is like selling and selling your ideas are no different. That's it. It's all humans.
Sales is everything, bro. Sales is everything. Yes.
Persuasion and people. All right. Well, we'll have to break this party up. It's been fun. I mean, it was a good. I love having a good discussion. I'm sure there's plenty of things that we agree on. And even if there weren't, it wouldn't matter, because like, we're two people trying to figure out the world and bumping into ideas and bringing them together. So everybody needs to have these types of conversations, and there shouldn't be anything scary about them. Go talk with people. You know what? And maybe they'll be more open over one beer. Maybe 10 beers is too many, but one beer might be a good place to start.
I learned the 10 beers was too much for me a long time ago. So that's why I don't drink anymore, Randy.
It's not good for the weight loss. It's not good for the weight loss. That's for sure.
Weight loss and a lot of other areas as well.
Mental health, spiritual, we could go on and on. But hey, at any rate, it was an absolute pleasure. I love the passion that you bring to whatever conversation that you're going to have. Like, you're just, whatever you're talking about, you're all in, you're super committed to the idea, but yet I still don't get the idea that you couldn't have your mind changed. So this is an awesome conversation. We'll do it again. We'll see if we can sneak in something else. Maybe I have to learn how you built your podcast. Maybe that could be an offline secret. Teach me.
I love it, man. Hey, you give me a shout. That's people helping people, man. That's how I make it work.
That's what it's about. All right. Well, we'll cut it from there. It was an absolute pleasure. Everybody, we appreciate you. We love you. We'll see you again some other time. Adios. Have a good one. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.
Be great.